Now we are joined from London by the political and economic analyst Babak Imamian. Thank you very much for being here with us. So how are these sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil expected to influence the markets, the US energy market, domestic oil prices, and of course the investment landscape?
Well, thank you for your question. It is very unpredictable to actually uh, estimate the effect of sanctions on the Russian economy. After all, Russians are masters of sanction busting. The sanction busting goes back to Napoleonic times when the continental system was set up by Napoleon to block uh, British trade across the Europe and outside. The Russians were sanction busting, and that's why in 1812 Napoleon attacked Russia uh, for sanction busting the British goods. So what I'm trying to say is sanction busting or trade in smuggling or whatever you want to call it goes back a long time. And if you look at it in the last over 100 years since 1917, there were only 23 years where Russians were not under sanction. So Russians are used to sanctions. And unfortunately, sanctions are only effective if they can be enforced. Now, to enforce them costs a lot of money. The other thing is we have to bear in mind that trade is a very forceful, natural force of life. Trade means putting bread on table. So a lot of people would cooperate with sanction busting because they need to put bread on the table. Otherwise, their businesses go bankrupt.
Yes, indeed. And could there be, do you think, long-term effects that the sanctions might have on global oil supply chains, though?
Well, higher oil prices means introducing inflation into your economy. And we know how the stabilizing is higher inflation in any economy. So you ask any world leader, would you like to introduce high inflation into your economy? The answer would be no. And we know that the source of high inflation, 80% of it is high energy costs, is high oil prices or gas prices. So, any leaders, especially in developing countries, they would go out of their way to have cheap energy in order to boost their economy. Otherwise, their system of government or the regime would collapse.
This EU accelerated a liquefied natural gas ban on Russia's imports. What does this say about the EU's energy strategy?
Well, we should say, what does it say about EU politicians? Look at UK politicians. We've had 6 prime ministers in the last 10 years. We've had 6 foreign secretaries in the last 5 years. So anything they say or they do is just optics, because they know they will not be around in 2 years' time to be accountable for their actions. Similarly, across Europe is the same. Look at France. They can't form a government, and also other countries. So all the conferences they have, all this centics they have, all the comments they make, it's all for just optics and winning headlines. But there is nothing concrete about it. The best thing they could do actually start diplomacy with Russia to end this war as soon as possible. That's what the President Trump has been saying. This war has to end as soon as possible. And President Trump is promoting that. Yet the European leaders are looking to escalate this beyond anything they can. Just escalate the war without considering the consequences. And the only beneficiary of this would be China, because if U.S. is dragged into a direct war with with Russia, China would be the only beneficiary.
Well, yeah, you mentioned China there. These sanctions, do you think they may end up reshaping global energy trade and economic relations throughout the world, and with China particularly?
Well, that's a very interesting question. If we go back to June 1941, when the Nazi Germany attacked Russia, and this is 6 months before Pearl Harbor, uh, uh, President Roosevelt started sending aids to Soviet Union, back then the Russia, uh, in order to help them to stand against Nazi Germany without having congressional approval. His reasoning was, if Nazi Germany gets hold of vast natural resources of Russia, they become unstoppable. Now, in 2022, the Europeans gifted Russia vast natural resources to China. And for the last 3 years, or now in its fourth year, China has been benefiting from vast natural resources of Russia. And every day that is becoming more apparent. And President Trump has been going out of his way that his first aim is to split Russia from China. He wants to bring Russia into the Western Hemisphere rather than having it into Eastern Hemisphere.
And do you think then that the US and the EU, it's going to hurt them, these sanctions? Do you think it's going to have an effect on inflation or economic growth?
It would definitely hurt UK and Europeans. If you look at, in my opinion, the biggest threat to Europe is not Russia, it's slow economic growth and high energy costs. If you look at it, as I said, all of them have short-term governments. There is no precise decisions are made. There are no leadership right now, and they just preoccupy themselves by this war in Ukraine and saying we are fighting for freedom and democracy, and they've turned a territorial dispute into a ideological war about freedom and democracy, and it's very ridiculous. And everybody sees that there is that lack of leadership in Europe and weak leadership, and the Europeans are nowhere when it comes in terms of geopolitics now.
And do you think the disruptions in the Russian oil exports might affect global commodity markets or the flow of foreign investment?
Well, every time we've seen an action like this, there has been a destabilizing period for a while. But as I said, trade is a very strong factor in life. Again, I go back, trade means putting food on the table. Whether it's manufacturing in the UK, manufacturing in Europe, they are looking for markets to sell their products. Because if they don't sell their products, they go bankrupt and they can't put food on the table. So there is, trade is a very strong, trade has been, one of the first human interactions from the beginning for over 10,000 years, since first humans. So that's the reason why sanctions, they don't really work. Sanctions work for perhaps a short period, 3 months or 6 months. Otherwise, trade would find routes and rebalance and readjust itself.
Oh, and Putin has just spoken in the last few moments. He has responded to these new sanctions imposed by the United States, saying they will not affect Russia's economy and that the country is resilient and self-sufficient, and that the measures are political pressure, but they won't change Russia's course. And in his words, any attack targeting Russia's interior will be met with a severe response. Why does he believe that these sanctions and warnings will have little impact on Russia, do you think?
Well, we've got to accept nationalism is very strong in Russia. Mother country, to them is very important. And we've seen them, whether again back in the Napoleonic War or in World War II. So this is what we don't want to do. We don't want to raise further Russian nationalism, but we want to actually have a greater friendship with Russia. Russia should be part of Europe. Russia should be part of Western Europe. In the next 20 to 30 years, the provinces, the population of provinces would be more than actually mainland Russia. And the Russian population composition would change. And Russia would become more Asian than European. And that is an important issue that the Europeans are not considering. We should be embracing Russia into Europe, not distancing it or pushing it more towards China and Far East.
Well, thank you very much. A pleasure as always, Babak Emamian, joining us from London, political and economic analyst. Thank you very much for being here on the program.